John, you've had a lifetime career involved in and around politics. What advice would you give to somebody who says they're interested in politics? What kind of routes could they go?
If somebody from a business background says that they're interested in a career in politics, what they've usually got in mind is a parliamentary career. In other words, they'd like to be an MP. That's not the only opportunity. There could be different grades of a councillor, county councillor, district councillor. Nowadays, you can try to be an elected mayor. You can be a police commissioner. And those are the elected jobs that they're paid jobs. And then you've got another bank of opportunities which are unpaid, which involve either voluntary work within a particular party or simply running a campaign to get the law changed in some ways. And you don't get paid for any of those. Those are the distinctions. Frankly, if people are beyond their 40th birthday and haven't already got their feet under the political table in some way and say they want to be a member of parliament, then the only sensible reply is stop wasting your time because you're not going to do it. And very few people say that. It's a brutal truth, but it needs to be given because otherwise people just will go up a blind alley.
And what other roles are there that are not directly MPs or councillors or whatever, but support roles, chairing committees or becoming involved in your local party? And how would you get involved?
Well, it varies. That varies from one party to another. I'm just thinking about the last reply I gave about being an MP. People will always come up with examples of people who were very successful in business, who then went on to be MPs. And they say, well, Archie Norman was the boss of Asda, and Kevin Hollinrake started and founded Hunter's estate agents. You've actually got to be very successful to get into politics, to get into Parliament from a business background. The other warning is that, with the exception of Kevin Hollinrake, who's the MP for Thirsk and Malton and is very good, most of the others do not succeed. So Archie Norman and some of the others who've got in with an apparently glittering business career behind them don't enjoy it, don't impress, and often come in believing that they can conquer the political world and causing resentment as a result. And many of them are unprepared for the routine drudgery. Do you really want to spend every Saturday morning between 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. listening to a procession of people every 15 minutes coming in saying, surely this is very unfair on me? And they're always right, and there's bugger all you can do about it. So just be careful before you say that is what I want to do for a living, because the salary is only about 65,000, 70,000 a year. Now, on the party side, unpaid, you can certainly join a party and become a branch chairman tomorrow, really, and then you can go up and become an association officer and an association chair. And there's a lot of work in that. That's very interesting. And then if you want, you can go on to be a regional officer and a national officer. Not many people choose that. And there's usually a contest to be an elected constituency association chair. In the Labour Party, there's always a contest for that. And it's a straightforward left-right political contest. In the Conservative Party, it's usually a contest between an elected councillor and somebody who doesn't want a councillor to do it. In the Liberal Democrats, they're always contested. In fact, they get rather more people putting themselves forward for constituency office. But that's just a bit on personality grounds, so far as I can see. But that can be quite rewarding. It's often a job that somebody who's been a success in a profession or a career will choose to do, but only for a while. I mean, they will normally do it for about 5 or 6 years and then back off and do something else. But that's easily doable, and people from a business background in any of the parties will normally be welcome to try to do it.
Now, I think you were behind the campaign against regional devolution, I think you'd call it, some time ago. What what happened there? Can you just tell the story of how you do it and reflecting on what the lessons are for other people who are thinking they care passionately about something which is political?
Yes, that's a very, very interesting route, because you've got to take something that you personally care about and try to convince people that you're right, not necessarily in one political party. I mean, spanning the political spectrum. In the case of the Yorkshire Says No campaign, everybody thinks it was to do with Brexit. It wasn't. It was 10 years before Brexit. It was when John Prescott was saying that Yorkshire should have its own directly elected regional assembly. Not a bad idea in itself. The trouble was he was going to spend a huge amount of money getting an assembly elected and people paid and a big building to put them in with nothing to do. And his argument was, well, let's get the thing set up and then the powers will follow. And, well, I know civil servants and they won't follow. And it'll become a white elephant. It'll cost a lot of money and then people will want to abolish it. A bit like police commissioners, to be honest. So I started running a campaign against that. And we were so successful that before the referendum even took place, Tony Blair told John Prescott to drop it because he was heading for such a big defeat. So they went ahead with the referendum like that in Newcastle, lost it by about 80% to 20%. And Tony Blair said, no more of this nonsense. And that was that. So I got a campaign going. We actually had a marvelous little office in Barnsley and a full-time staff of students. And then suddenly they were on the campaign floor because we'd won without a vote being cast. And that lasted about a year. And it was almost a full-time job, Victoria. But I wasn't paid anything for that. I ultimately didn't get many thanks because we didn't have a visible victory. But I'm also involved with, well, I'm a member of the British Humanist Society. So we are campaigning against some forms of religious education in schools, by which I really mean the more extreme religious education in schools. And then I'm an active member of MD, which is My Death, My Decision, which is campaigning for people to have a medical assistance in dying in England, instead of having to pay 10,000 quid to travel to Switzerland to get it done. Now, those are both campaigns that I believe in, and therefore I can argue, I think, a bit more convincingly, because I'm not putting forward somebody else's viewpoint. And that is very worthwhile.
So if somebody wants to campaign, where should they start?
You should start with feeling indignant. you should start by hearing something on the news that strikes you as ridiculous and wanting to get it changed. Preferably not a campaign which wants the government to spend more money on your cause, because every campaign wants that. But a campaign to change the law in some way, which doesn't actually have a financial impact on the Treasury, that can be very worthwhile. I mean, Kevin Hollinrake, who I mentioned earlier on, I don't know if you remember the case of Claudia Lawrence in York, who disappeared, and she still disappeared. I mean, it's pretty apparent that she was murdered, but no, she'd never been found, and the case has never been solved. 10 years had gone by after her disappearance, and her family still could not wind up the estate because she wasn't dead, So Kevin was persuaded by a local action group to put a private member's bill in Parliament, which is now called Claudia's Law, that enables estates to be wound up, even when we're not totally sure that somebody is dead. Now, that's a very, very helpful law. And he piloted it through personally, because it wasn't a government bill, because it had been suggested to him by people running a campaign to that effect. Now, that is a good MP knowing what to do, responding well to a pressure group that wasn't even in his constituency, actually, but was in his locality. That is the way the system should work. And on both sides, it can be very satisfying indeed.
Anything else that you want to add about thinking of a career in politics, whatever that means? Anything else that you think of people as they're retiring that they might want to know or consider or do?
Well, there are huge opportunities in local authorities, and of course they're all changing at the moment. And you do get paid a bit, but you really have to work for the pay that you get. I mean, if you get elected to North Yorkshire County Council, I think your basic salary as an elected councillor is about 11 or 12,000. If you then get into the cabinet and given responsibility for highways or the schools or social services, you get another 10 or 11,000 on top of that. So you get about 23,000, 24,000 plus some expenses. But by the time you get into the cabinet, it's almost a full-time job. It's very interesting. It's very rewarding. And you get a degree of executive power that you would never have had as a member of parliament, but don't really expect to do much else. If you're on a borough council like Harrogate Borough Council or Craven or Hambleton or something, you'll get 6,000 or 7,000, maybe a bit more in a bigger council. And you've got quite a lot of local meetings to do and a number of council meetings and committees to go to, which I always found interesting. I know others find them a total bind. The one that's the money spinner is to become a police commissioner, because they get about 80,000 a year. And I don't totally know what they do, but they were introduced 10 years ago with the idea that we must get elected police commissioners so the police service itself can be democratically accountable. Well, it hasn't worked. I mean, you ask people, who is the police commissioner for North Yorkshire? No, there is one, and they earn, Julia Mulligan actually, and she earns 70 or 80,000 a year and has just been deselected. But you don't really read about her. She'll probably slosh me across the face for saying this. You don't really read about her doing very much. And there's an active campaign to get her successor re-elected at the moment. I think they are going to be abolished sooner or later. And I wouldn't suggest anybody seeking retirement should tilt at that particular windmill. Elected mayors, on the other hand, have real power. And I think that we've already got an elected mayor in South Yorkshire. I think we're going to get an elected mayor of West Yorkshire. And then in some form, there will certainly be one in North Yorkshire, whether it'll be North and East Yorkshire and so on, I don't know. But, and those will be fought on political grounds. So there will, I mean, in Yorkshire, there'll be Conservative, Labour, Liberal, Democrat, Green, the Yorkshire Party, and then one or two independents who are seeking to do it. And independents often win. That's the odd thing about mayoral elections. So the mayor of Middlesbrough, who is quite good, ran as an independent and got in. The mayor of Hartlepool ran as the mascot for the Hartlepool football team called Angus the Monkey, and he got in. And then he threw away the disguise and said, no, it's me, I'm a real person, and I want to be a real mayor. And that's the sort of surprising thing. So there's quite a bit of traction going down that route, and you can do that from the business route as well.